I still remember the moment everything I thought I knew about people began to change. I didn't expect it to happen in an airport. I didn't expect it to happen thousands of miles away from home. And I definitely didn't expect a complete stranger to make me question the way I had been living for years. If you're watching this because you've ever wondered whether kindness still exists in this world, I want you to stay with me. Because what happened to me in the Philippines in 2026 wasn't what I planned. It wasn't what the travel websites promised. It was something far more personal. Before I booked the flight, I wasn't looking for adventure. I was looking for a break. I'm in my early 60s now. And for most of my life, I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I worked hard. I paid my bills. I raised a family. I showed up when people needed me. Somewhere along the way, though, I forgot how to slow down. After retiring, I thought life would suddenly feel peaceful. Instead, the silence got louder. My kids were busy with their own lives. My friends had their own routines. Every morning looked exactly like the one before it. Coffee, news, a walk around the neighborhood, television, bed. One evening, I caught myself staring out the kitchen window for nearly an hour without realizing it. That scared me. So I made a decision that surprised even me. I was going to travel alone. Friends suggested Europe. Someone told me to take an Alaskan cruise. My brother kept talking about Arizona. Then one night, I stumbled across a video about the Philippines. Beautiful beaches, green mountains, crowded markets, smiling faces. But one sentence stayed with me. People here make you feel like family. I remember laughing to myself. Yeah, I said. Every travel video says that. Still, something about it stayed in my mind. A few weeks later, I booked the ticket. I'll admit something I'm not proud of. I boarded that plane carrying more than luggage. I carried assumptions. I expected delays. I expected confusion. I expected people to be polite because they worked in tourism. I certainly didn't expect strangers to care about me. The flight was long enough to make me question whether I'd made a mistake. When we finally landed, I looked out the window at Manila. The city stretched farther than I imagined. Bright lights, heavy traffic, buildings mixed with palm trees. Everything felt unfamiliar. As I walked through the airport, I noticed something almost immediately. People smiled. Not the quick, customer service smile I was used to back home. A real smile. The kind that reaches someone's eyes. An airport employee noticed me studying a sign. "You okay, sir?" he asked. "I think so." I answered with a nervous laugh. Just trying to figure out where I'm supposed to go. He walked away from his station, actually walked away. He pointed toward immigration and stayed with me long enough to make sure I understood. Before leaving, he smiled again. "Welcome to the Philippines." Simple words, but somehow they felt sincere. Outside the airport, everything became louder. Cars, motorcycles, people talking, vendors calling out. For a moment, I wondered if I'd made the biggest mistake of my retirement. Then I realized something else. No one seemed rushed. Busy? Absolutely. But angry? Not really. Back home, I was used to people avoiding eye contact. Here, people looked at each other. I climbed into a taxi and gave the driver the address of my hotel. He glanced at me in the mirror. "First time? Is it that obvious?" He laughed. A little. For the next 30 minutes, he wasn't just a driver. He became my first conversation in a country I barely knew. He asked where I came from. He wanted to know if I had children. He recommended foods I should try. He warned me not to skip breakfast if the hotel served garlic fried rice. "You'll thank me later," he said. By the time we arrived, I realized something. He had spent the entire ride trying to make sure I enjoyed his country. Not because he had to. Because he wanted to. That stayed with me. The hotel wasn't luxurious, but it was clean. The woman at the front desk greeted me like an old neighbor. "Welcome, long trip?" It felt like it. She laughed softly. "You should rest tonight. Tomorrow you'll see why people love it here." Again, that word, welcome. It kept appearing. I unpacked slowly and stood on the balcony. The city below never seemed to stop moving. Children laughed somewhere down the street. Music floated through the evening air. Someone was cooking nearby, and I could smell garlic, grilled meat, and something sweet I couldn't identify. I should have been exhausted. Instead, I couldn't stop watching. The next morning, I decided to walk without much of a plan. Looking back, that decision changed everything. I wandered past small shops opening for the day. Families were eating breakfast together. Neighbors greeted one another. A little boy waved at me as if we'd met before. I waved back. His grandmother smiled. "Good morning," I answered. "Good morning." That tiny exchange shouldn't have mattered. But it did, because I realized it had been a long time since strangers greeted me without wanting something. I stopped at a small cafe that wasn't listed in any guidebook. The owner noticed I was studying the menu. "Need help?" "I've never tried most of this," he grinned. "Then today is a good day." He recommended a simple breakfast and sat with me for a few minutes while business was slow. We talked about baseball, family, weather, and growing older. Nothing extraordinary, yet somehow it felt extraordinary. As I finished eating, I reached for my wallet. The owner looked confused. "It's already taken care of." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He pointed toward the door. The older couple who had been sitting across the room had quietly left. They paid before they went. I looked outside, hoping to thank them. They were already gone. I stood there holding my wallet, wondering why complete strangers would buy breakfast for someone they'd never met. The cafe owner smiled. "They probably wanted you to remember your first morning." I thought he meant my first morning in the Philippines. Later, I realized he meant something much bigger than that, and I had no idea that this simple breakfast was only the beginning of the story. I walked out of that little cafe with more questions than answers. It wasn't about the money. The breakfast wasn't expensive. What stayed with me was the reason behind it. Back home, people usually paid for someone they already knew. Here, someone had quietly done it without expecting a thank you. I kept thinking about that as I wandered through the neighborhood. The streets were alive. Small stores spilled onto the sidewalks. Fresh fruit was stacked in colorful displays. I could hear music coming from an open window, and somewhere nearby a group of children were laughing so hard that I couldn't help smiling too. One little girl looked at me and waved. Her friends started giggling, and within seconds they were all waving as if I were someone they had been waiting to meet. It sounds like such a small thing, but when you've spent years feeling almost invisible, even a simple wave can reach your heart. I stopped at a market where local vendors were arranging vegetables, seafood, and handmade crafts. Everything felt busy, but nobody seemed impatient. An older woman noticed me looking at a basket she had woven by hand. "You like?" she asked. "It's beautiful," I answered. She smiled proudly and showed me how every strand had been carefully woven together. Even though we didn't share the same first language, somehow we understood each other. I bought the basket, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to remember the conversation. As she handed it to me, she gently touched her heart and said, "Thank you, my friend." My friend. Nobody had called me that in a long time. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a jeepney. I had read about them before arriving, but riding in one was something completely different. Bright colors covered every inch of the vehicle. Music played softly from the driver's radio. Every seat slowly filled with people heading home, going to work, or simply running errands. I wasn't exactly sure how the payment worked. I quietly asked the young man sitting beside me. "I'm sorry," I whispered, "first time." He smiled immediately. "No problem, sir." Instead of just explaining it, he collected my fare and passed it forward through several passengers. One by one, every person helped move the money toward the driver without anyone saying much at all. It happened so naturally that I almost laughed. Back home, people barely acknowledged the person sitting next to them. Here, complete strangers worked together without thinking twice. The young man introduced himself as Miguel. He asked what brought me to the Philippines. "I think I needed a change," I admitted. He nodded slowly. "Sometimes we travel to find places." Then he smiled. "Sometimes we travel to find ourselves." I didn't answer right away. His words landed deeper than I expected. When my stop came, he pointed toward a nearby park. "You should visit there before sunset." "Is it famous?" He shrugged. "No." "Then why?" "Families go there." That was all he said. Curious, I followed his advice. The park wasn't filled with tourists. It was filled with life. Grandparents watched grandchildren play. Teenagers practiced basketball. Couples shared snacks on benches. Parents laughed while chasing toddlers across the grass. Nobody seemed to be in a hurry to leave. I found an empty bench and simply watched for almost an hour without checking my phone, without looking at the time, without feeling like I needed to be somewhere else. An elderly man eventually sat beside me. He nodded politely. "You visiting?" "Yes." "You like our country?" I smiled. "So far." more than I expected. He looked toward the playground where two small boys were running after each other. We don't always have everything. He paused, but we try to take care of each other. There was no pride in his voice, no attempt to impress me. He was simply describing the way he saw life. As the sun slowly dropped lower, families began sharing food they had brought from home. One family noticed me sitting alone. The mother walked over carrying a container. "You eat?" I stood up quickly. "Oh no, thank you. I don't want to bother you." "You not bothering." She smiled. "Please." Before I knew it, I was sitting with people whose names I had just learned. They handed me grilled chicken, rice, fresh mangoes, and homemade desserts. The father asked about America. Their teenage son wanted to practice his English. Their youngest daughter kept asking if I liked Filipino food. Every time I finished something, someone added more to my plate. I hadn't experienced hospitality like that in years. When it was finally time to leave, the grandmother gently squeezed my hand. "You come back." It wasn't a sales pitch, it wasn't politeness. She genuinely meant it. Walking back to my hotel that evening, I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe even years. But that night, something unexpected happened. I called my daughter. She answered after the second ring. "Dad, how's your trip?" For a second, I didn't know what to say. Then I surprised both of us. "I think I've forgotten what kindness feels like." There was silence on the line. Finally, she asked softly, "What happened?" I told her about the cafe, the jeepney, the family in the park, the strangers who had treated me as though I belonged. She listened quietly. Then she said something that stayed with me. "Dad, maybe they've always been kind." "What do you mean?" "Maybe you've just been too busy surviving to notice kindness anymore." I sat on the edge of my hotel bed after we ended the call. I kept replaying those words in my head. She wasn't criticizing me. She was telling me something I needed to hear. Somewhere over the years, I had become cautious, guarded, suspicious. Not because people had always been cruel, but because life had slowly convinced me to expect less from others. Yet in only 2 days, the Philippines was gently challenging every one of those expectations. I thought I understood why I had come here. I believed I was taking a vacation. Now I wasn't so sure, because deep down it was beginning to feel as though this country wasn't just showing me beautiful places. It was quietly rebuilding a part of me that I didn't even realize had been broken. And the most unforgettable moment of my journey was still waiting for me.